By the time the contract was finalized, he had left, gone to Colorado, and Mr. Schemmel had replaced him. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
Now, let's go, if we might go through a couple of the terms of this document. Michaela, if you could go to Roman numeral 2A. And let me be clear before we get into all of this. You read this contract before you signed it, true?
Yes, sir.
And to the extent that you had questions about its terms, you would have discussed those questions with Mr. Meadows. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the Roman numeral 2 says, 2A says, services as the head women's basketball coach shall include coach conducting herself at all times in a professional manner in all media and public relations activities attendant, it says, to his university employment as head women's basketball coach, and in all fundraising activities and camps on behalf of the Department of Athletics fundraising programs and events. Do you see that?
I do.
And you understood that that provision was in your agreement at the time you signed it?
Yes.
Then in the terms of the agreement, if you go down to Roman numeral 3, Michaela. Item 3 says, term of agreement, this employment agreement shall commence on April 8, 2005 and continue through May 1, 2010. Subject, however, to the terms and conditions in this agreement concerning earlier termination. Let me stop you there. You were aware at the time you signed Exhibit 86 that it did contain provisions which covered the issue of early termination of the agreement. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then it says, so this was initially a 5-year term subject to all of the other provisions of the agreement, and it says the terms of this agreement will be subject to review no earlier than March 1, 2007. And that was a provision that you could trigger. That is, once March 1, 2007 came around, you could trigger a review of the agreement by notifying the athletic director?
Yes.
Let's go to page 2 of Exhibit 86. Under headings, if you could bring up headings A, 1, 2, and 3. A is entitled University Compensation and Benefits, state funded, and item 1 says, for her duties as head coach of the women's basketball program, coach shall serve as an administrator 3 in the MPP at a salary of $10,750 per month or $129,000 on an annual basis. We stop you there. So the $129,000 on an annual basis, that was sometimes referred to as your base salary?
Yes, that'd be correct.
And then let's go to item 2. It says, as an administrator 3, the terms of coach's appointment and service are governed by this employment agreement and the MPP, which is found in section 42720 et sec of Title V of the California Code of Regulations. Any commitment to coach regarding service or appointment not expressly contained in this employment agreement or in the MPP is void. A copy of the MPP accompanies this agreement and is incorporated herein by this reference. If there is any conflict between this agreement and the MPP, this agreement shall control it. Now, as of the time you signed this agreement, were you familiar with the MPP?
As it had been explained to me, this was my initial contract.
This initial, when you were at San Diego State from 89 to 97, do you recall whether your employment agreements also referred to the MPP?
I sure don't recall.
Item 3 says, in accord with section 42723 of the MPP, no tenure or permanent status is granted with this appointment, and no tenure or permanent status can be achieved within the MPP. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
And if we go to page 7, it's Exhibit 86, page 7. And starting here, if you just go to the top and do A.
I'm sorry, I have Exhibit 86, page 6.
You don't have a page 7?
I don't have a, then it goes to page 1. I don't have a page 7. I have a page 6.
Right. I'm sorry. I was referring to the dates numbers on the
Oh,
lower right.
I'm sorry.
Apologies.
Pages.
I should have included. And again, just generally, as I understand it, you have at some point in time reviewed the management personnel plan, or the so-called MPP. Is that correct?
At some point, yes.
You recall reading it online at some point in time. Is that correct?
I can't recall whether it was hard copy or online. I can't. I don't.
Can you tell us when you read it?
I can't.
And again, just the structure provision, section 42720, and I'm just going to read the first sentence. It says, the California State University Management Personnel Plan is an integrated personnel system addressing the employment rights, benefits, and conditions of those California State University employees designated as, quote, management or supervisory under the Higher Education and Employer-Employee Relation Act. Now, again, without getting into all the details of it, did you understand that the management personnel plan governed the terms and conditions of management or supervisory employees of the Cal State system?
Well, my agent did the negotiations and explained that when you supervise a certain amount of people, you are placed in a category called MPP, and there are some things that go along with being in that MPP category. So I do recall the phrase MPP on occasion. I do.
Right. And you also, you understood that as a management or supervisory employee, you were not a member of any collective bargaining unit. Is that correct?
To the best of my ability.
Now, when we looked at your, previously looked at page, you don't have to go to this, but this was page 2 of Exhibit 86. It talked about, in accord with section 42723 of the NPP, no tenure or permanent status is granted. If we go to page 9, 86, Exhibit 86, page 9, of 009, referring to the pages, I'm referring to this number now.
Got it. Yes, thank you.
And again, at the top under 42723, employment status, you see it says, this is 42723, a management personnel plan employee serves at the pleasure of the campus president or the chancellor as appropriate. A management personnel plan employee shall not serve a probationary permanent period and shall not receive permanent status. So you understood that, unlike, like, say, a faculty member, you were obtaining tenure. Is that
Yes,
correct?
coaches would like to obtain tenure, I would think, but that wasn't an option.
If we go down to item D,
In the MPP? Or in
yes,
the,
again, same page, page 9 of Exhibit 86. This item D, except in the case of layoff, the president or chancellor, as appropriate, shall give a management personnel plan employee notice of termination at least 3 months prior to the employee's separation date, or shall give a management personnel plan employee corresponding salary in lieu of notice. And I think you indicated to us that at the April 16 meeting, at which you were being advised of your termination, that you were provided with the 3 months salary. Is that correct? The 90 days?
Yes.
Now, I want to go back to if we go to the page 4 of Exhibit 86, that is 0004. Under item 5, item 5 covered the issue of termination and said, notwithstanding any other provision of this agreement, coach's appointment may be terminated by university for cause without further obligation of university. In item E, it says conduct of coach which is seriously prejudicial to the best interests of university or its athletic program, or which is a material violation of university's policies. Now, with respect to these termination provisions, did you discuss these termination provisions with your agent, Mr. Meadows, before you signed the contract?
We discussed the contract in general. I don't know that we went bullet by bullet. I read it, and where I had questions, we discussed it.
Do you recall any particular discussion regarding the termination provisions?
Not that I recall, no.
One of the other provisions I want to discuss, and then we'll move to your 2007 contract, if you would take a look at let's move. Let's just go to the page 6 of Exhibit 86. And again, is that your signature on page 6 of Exhibit 86?
It is?
And it was also signed by, was that Mr. Schemmel?
Yes.
And it was also signed by Sue Blair. Who was Sue Blair, if you know?
Sue Blair was the HR, university HR at the time of my second stint, first contract.
Now, am I correct that you put up Exhibit 66, which I believe is already in evidence? And can you find Exhibit 66?
I have it. Thank you. I have 66.
Again, Exhibit 66, if you could just bring up the very top paragraph. And again, this agreement is dated the 11th day of September 2007. So am I correct? This contract came about after you triggered the 2-year annual review under the first contract?
Yes.
And again, with respect to this contract, were you also represented by Mr. Meadows?
I was. I am.
And Mr. Schemmel, let's go to the signature page. I see it's your signature, Mr. Schemmel's signature, and the signature of Rochelle Thaler, Associate Vice President for Administration. Am I correct? You did not have any contact with Ms. Thaler with respect to the negotiation of this agreement. Is that correct?
Correct.
And the financial terms of this agreement would have been negotiated between Mr. Schemmel and Mr. Meadows?
Correct.
So Mr. Schemmel remained the athletic director in 2007?
Yes.
And if we go to item page number 2, I'm not going to repeat all of these provisions that we've already talked about. But if we go to page 0002, and we go to compensation, and if you could do items 1 through 3, Michaela. This indicates that it looks like your base salary compensation, as set forth in item 1, had been increased from the $129,000 number now to $175,000. Is that correct?
The quarterly reviews were eliminated, so they rolled it all into base.
I see. So you're saying, and I think we saw earlier in the trial, you, on your original contract, you had some quarterly incentive payments?
Yes.
So you're saying, rather than having separate quarterly incentive payments, all of that money was simply rolled into your base salary?
Yes.
And again, items 2 and 3, again, repeat the verbiage regarding the MPP. Is that correct? That you were subject to the management personal plan?
Yes.
And if we go to page 3, numerical number 3 of Exhibit 66, and under item 6 above, item 6 says it is the intention of the parties that the payments to be made from the MPP salary base will be guaranteed through the term of this agreement, subject to the termination provisions found in section Roman numeral 5A and 5B intro. And again, you were aware at the time you signed this agreement that, again, there were provisions in the agreement that covered the issue of earlier termination?
Yes, sir.
And when we say that the base salary would be guaranteed, that's a reference back to the salary set forth in the $175,000 salary?
Yes.
Now, also in 2007, under item C, there were some achievement bonuses that were apparently inserted into the agreement as a result, apparently, of negotiations between Mr. Schemmel and Mr. Meadows. Is that correct?
Yes.
In the third paragraph, the bottom of item 1 there, it says, all bonuses shall be tied to academic achievement. The bonuses will be paid only if either of the following conditions are met: APR is at 925 or above, or any future number determined by the NCAA as the cutoff. And again, I don't think we need to get deeply into this, but APR is the academic progress rate, and that is some measure of the extent to which you're graduating students.
Actually, it's a past measurement. So the tricky part in an early contract is your APR is someone else's. And so if someone else if the prior regime had 16 athletes leave in the 3 years prior, upon arriving, our APR was below the NCAA standard. The progress rate was not at its peak, but it wasn't your progress rate. It actually takes you 4 years. You have to be somewhere 4 years for the APR rate to be attributed to yourself or your staff.
Right. When you come on board in 2005,
the APR was, I believe, 8.9 something or close to 9.
Right. So you inherited that.
Correct.
And you want to achieve at least the minimum APR, because if you don't, that has repercussions with respect to your ability to, for instance, participate in postseason playoffs. Is that correct?
Actually, 2005 was the first year that APR was ever adopted to the NCAA. So no one, administrators, coaches, no one really knew where it was going to go. And my administration had cautioned us to save the scholarship because of what had occurred prior to us getting there, in case they went that strictly with the protocol. As it was, because we are a small squad, without getting too far into what APR is, in a small number, 1 or 2 people can make a huge variance as opposed to a squad of 80 people. So they gave, the first few years, I forget what they called it, forgiveness radius or some such, where they had a parameter around the hard number to allow you to improve. So it never came to, we never lost a scholarship because of the number being too low.
Right. And then it says here, or you had an alternative to achieve your bonuses based on academic achievement. The alternative was the team cumulative GPA for tenured student athletes is at or above 2.25. And the cumulative grade point is no less than 2.0 by 75% of the tenured student athletes. So you had alternative ways of achieving academic achievement, which in turn would allow you to receive any of the bonuses listed above. Is that correct?
Yes.
So you had a financial incentive to see to it that academic achievement was obtained by your squad, correct?
Yes.
When we talk about tenured student athletes, are those the scholarship student athletes on your team? Is that what that means?
Yes, but if anybody, even if someone had been given books, anybody who received anything would then make them considered a tenured student athlete in the eyes of the APR and the NCAA.
So to be clear, this 2.0, this is on a 2.0 on a 4.0 scale.
C average, yes.
And then you had on the bottom, there's some revenue bonuses. It says coach may earn up to an additional $20,000 per year in revenue bonuses based on season and single game ticket sales as follows. Season ticket and single game revenue $50,000 to $70,000. You see that? And that would trigger a revenue bonus on the next page of the top, a $10,000 bonus, correct?
Yes.
Did you ever achieve the season ticket single game revenue target of $50,000 to $70,000?
In the 05 contract, yes. In the 07, no. They upped the numbers.
Now, just to be clear, we're talking here about how much revenue your program generates in ticket sales for home games. Is that correct?
Yes. Season ticket sales. Or single game sales, yes.
Right. And within this, am I correct that the women's basketball program, its annual expenses, if we include financial aid, if we include coaches' salaries, if we include equipment, if we include game day expenses, travel, and recruiting, that the budget or the amount expended by the university was approximately $1.8 to $2 million.
I'm not the number cruncher, but I'll agree to that.
And so I think we talked earlier in the trial. So and that money that's expended on on the women's basketball program, that came from a variety of sources. Is that correct?
The money, the operating budget?
Yes.
Are you asking if donors could increase that, or I'm not sure. I'm not sure what your question is. I'm sorry.
You received some of that money that went into the athletic department budget and eventually went to the women's basketball program came from student fees. Is that correct?
Objection. Calls for speculation, lacks foundation on behalf of this witness, Your Honor.
Wait some foundation. I want to make sure you're both on the same page.
Am I correct that every year a budget was created for women's basketball?
Yes.
And before the budget was finalized, it was discussed with you and Ms. Stevens, your director of ops, correct?
Yes.
And the person, at least throughout most of your tenure, that created the budget was Mr. Lang, Chuck Lang?
There were people before Chuck, but yes, Chuck was one of our business people.
And he was the business person that was, to your understanding, was still in charge of the budget as of the time you left the university in 2013. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
And when he went over the budget, did you come to understand where the $1.8 to $2 million was coming from to fund your program?
I didn't go over the budget with Mr. Lang.
Suffice it to say that your program wasn't carrying itself based on ticket revenue, single season, or single game, or season ticket revenue. Is that correct?
What do you ask me about carrying itself? We weren't doing our part? Is that what you're...
No, you weren't carrying yourself. That is, you weren't generating sufficient funds to fund your own program. Is that correct?
That would be very correct, yes.
And in fact, that would have been the case with the vast majority of the sports at San Diego State University. Is that correct?
Calls for speculation, lacks foundation.
Do you know that just guessing?
I think I know nationally without just guessing. I think it's true.
The only sports that carried themselves were men's basketball and football. Is that correct?
I don't know that to be true.
What do you think is not true about that?
Well, I have no idea what it costs to operate a football team in 2005 and what the ticket revenue was that counteracted that cost. I can't speak to that. I don't know that the ticket revenue in 2005 for men's basketball. I don't know. I don't know their operating and I don't know their expenses. I can't speak to that.
And again, part of what goes into the budget is also our contributions from donors and things of that nature. Is that correct?
Yes, I was unaware it went into the budget, but as we discussed the other day, yes.
And isn't it correct, women's basketball budget was approximately twice the size of any other women's sport at San Diego State University during your second tenure. Is that correct?
I really have no idea.
Well, can you think of another women's sport at SDSU that had a budget even in excess of $1 million during your second tenure at SDSU?
I didn't work with our budget, and I certainly wasn't aware of anybody else's budget.
And
I
again,
know there's costs involved with not owning your building, and that was a big thing that perhaps other sports wouldn't have to face if they're playing outside on the field versus having to always rent a facility.
but the men's basketball had to rent the same facility. Is that correct?
Yes, to the
In
best
fact,
of my knowledge.
their rent was higher than the rent for women's basketball at the time.
Why would that be?
Do you know that to be true or not?
I have no idea.
Let's go through the, again, with respect to the bonuses, am I correct that under the 2007 agreement, you never achieved the requisite levels of 50 to 70,000 or over 70,000 to achieve any of these revenue bonuses?
That'd be correct.
Now, if we could go to item we could go to exhibit, same exhibit, page 005. go to item 3. And again, this simply related to part of your contract was that the university would make available to the coach for basketball camps, the university gyms and related facilities. But am I correct that pursuant to this provision, if you wanted to use the facilities for camps and things of that nature, there would be costs associated with renting the facilities? True?
If I understood your question, there's costs right now. There was cost for this.
Correct. That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
And we had a previous discussion with respect to Coach Fisher's contract. That's Exhibit 165.
Yes, I remember.
And on 165, page 2, we go down to item 8. Again, this is Coach Fisher's extension in 8th day of August 2011. It looks like Coach Fisher's agent was able to negotiate a provision that, quote, athletics will pay any rental charges for use of Peterson Gym and/or Aztec Recreation Center to operate coaches' approved camps, correct?
Yes.
And did you know about that at the time?
Yes.
And in any of the proposals that Mr. Meadows sent to the university, either in 05, 7, or in the 2010 and 2012 extensions, did Mr. Meadows ever ask the university for a provision similar to what we see in Coach Fisher's contract?
Multiple times. It was a regular complaint, as was the date.
Are you saying that Mr. Meadows sent that in writing to the university?
I can't speak to how Mr. Meadows, sometimes he texted, sometimes he emailed, but that was a big complaint, which is why, especially again with the date, that we had this put in this contract. We didn't succeed in having them pay, but we couldn't get dates. And when we couldn't get dates, you can't advertise. And when you can't advertise and you bring your dates out late, people's calendars are already filled. So we negotiated in that by October 1st, Steve Bartell and the facilities people had to block off whatever dates we had requested.
If we take a look at Exhibit 40, page 3, which was previously admitted into evidence, you see this, you recall that this is Mr. Meadows' proposal to the university for your 2012 contract?
Yes.
And I don't see any provision in here whereby Mr. Meadows asked for a provision similar to that Coach Fisher's contract in 2011. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I needed to get
I don't see anything in here whereby...
In 2012, no.
Now let's go back to the Exhibit 66. And again, on page 5 of Exhibit 66, I want to talk about, first of all, about provision 5A. 5A says, it is understood that the university retains the right to assign or reassign the coach to other positions during the term of this appointment. In no event, however, will coach be assigned to any position which is not consistent with coach's education and experience as determined by the university. If coach is reassigned to any position other than head women's basketball coach, coach shall be paid by university as set forth in section 4A1. And 4A1 was again your base salary, correct?
Where would I find 4A1?
It would
Is that
be
the first
on-
page?
It would be on page 2 of Exhibit 66.
Yes, I have it. Thank you.
So the base salary is $175,000, correct?
In '07, yes.
So again, you read this provision prior to the time you signed the agreement, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you understood that one of the options to the university was to reassign you from the head coaching position to another position within the university, is that correct?
Yes.
Did you discuss that with Mr. Meadows before you signed the agreement?
Being reassigned?
Yes.
Not that I recall.
And the reassignment provision didn't require cause, correct?
That calls for legal conclusion, Your Honor, on behalf.
Well, as you understood it,
May I read it?
Sure. And again, I'm just asking them if
You're asking me if I could
5A.
be 5A. 5A. And your question regarding 5A?
You understood that you could be reassigned without cause, is that correct?
To the best of my legal knowledge, yes.
And then if we go to Roman numeral 5B, we get into the provisions for cause for termination of your appointment, correct?
Yes.
And then if we go to page 6 of Exhibit 56, we have a similar list to what we saw in Exhibit 86, including item F. Conduct of coach which is seriously prejudicial to the best interest of university or its athletic program, or which is a material violation of university's policies. And again, that's a provision similar to what we saw in your 2005 agreement, correct?
Yes.
Now, if we go to the next page, page 7 of Exhibit 66, if you go to item C, again, we're not talking about reassignment here, we're talking about termination. And it says, quotes, upon separation from university for cause, all salary, base compensation, and bonus compensation and benefits will cease as of the date of such separation. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
And then if we go to item D, item D says in the event coach's termination by university for reasons other than as previously set forth in this agreement, coach shall be entitled to receive the MTP salary without any obligation to mitigate damages, less compensation from subsequent employment of any kind. Did I read that correctly?
You did.
So the issue, as you understood it, was if you're terminated for cause, the university has no further financial obligation. If you're terminated from employment for reasons other than cause, the university had this remaining financial obligation to you. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's one of the things that we're litigating here in this trial.
Yes.
If we go to item F on the same page, now, item F has a provision says this contract will be terminated if coach voluntarily terminates her employment with the university, and coach will have the following buyout obligations payable to the university upon separation. And then it gives kind of a sliding scale, diminishing scale of what you might owe in case you voluntarily left the employment.
Yes.
So you understood at the time you signed this agreement that you could voluntarily leave your employment. You didn't have to stay for 5 years. But if you did, there might be some financial cost to doing that. Is that
Yes.
correct? Under item Roman numeral 6, miscellaneous, just under item A, that's fine. That's fine. Item A says coach shall be responsible for the scheduling of basketball games subject to the approval of university's director of athletics. Such approval not to be unreasonably withheld. And again, that scheduling function, was that something you did, or did Tammy Stevens do that, or how did it work?
It was kind of a team effort. I was the final answer, but various people, we kind of divided and conquered on how we did that.
And again, so we're clear, when you got into the conference season, the conference kind of controlled who
Yes.
you would play and when.
You only scheduled your non-conference games, 10 or 11, depending on how many league games you had.
So those were generally games or tournaments in November and December, is that
Yes.
correct? Now let's go to exhibit number 88. Do you have that there?
Addendum? Does it start
Yes.
with addendum? Yes. 2010?
Yes.
Got it. Thank you.
And again, is it correct that in 2010, this addendum was entered into between you and the university, correct?
Yes?
Go to page 2. Again, this was signed by you. Mr. Stirk was the athletic director at the time, and Ms. Thaler, correct?
Yes.
And were the terms, the financial terms of this agreement negotiated on your behalf by Mr. Meadows?
They were?
And if we go to, let's go to item 2, page 2, paragraph 2 on page 1. You know, without reading all of this, it recites that you're still a administrator for the MPP, and your annual salary was now $200,000, correct?
That's correct.
And it says, in future years, coach shall receive a merit increase of base pay the same as other MPP employees as deemed appropriate by the athletics director. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
All right. And then if we go to the paragraph above it, the last sentence of 1, it says, it says, let's go through the paragraph. This agreement is going to continue until what, June 30th, 2015?
Yes.
So these, it seemed that when your agreement was originally entered into and then was redone, is it correct that it always allowed for or provided for a 5-year term,
Yes.
subject to the earlier termination provisions, correct?
In my second stint, yes.
Then it says parties agreed to the potential review of the terms and conditions after the 2012 season. And again, you did request a review at the end of the 2012 season.
I did.
And then it tells you requesting parties shall make the request in writing to the other party within 30 days of the last game of the 2012 season. This constitutes a 5-year extension to the original contract. And again, one of the purposes of having a 5-year contract was, is it fair to say that it would assist in recruiting?
Yes.
So when you're talking to recruits, and if the recruit, say, likes you and members of your staff, it was somewhat reassuring that you had a 5-year agreement, correct?
Yes.
But you wouldn't get into the details of your agreement with the recruits, would you?
For the most part, recruits and their parents wanted to know what your commitment was to the university for their 4-year period.
Right. But you didn't get into, say, under my contract, I can leave early, or under my contract, I can be terminated early. You didn't get into that kind of
No.
stuff. And if we take a look at, again, this is exhibit page 2 of exhibit 88. The second paragraph, again, we see the same provision that bonuses were tied to academic achievement. And did that remain the situation from 2007 on, to the best of your knowledge?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
And then item 4 says, there are no additional changes to the contract. The remainder of the original agreement is in full force and effect. Did you understand that to be the case at the time you signed it?
I did.
Finally, let's go to exhibit 89. Again, this was the review that was again triggered at the end of the 2012 season, and this was your addendum that was entered into in July of 2012, correct?
Yes.
We go to page 2. It's signed by you, Mr. Sturk, and Ms. Rento. Is that true?
Yes.
Go back to page 1. We go to item 1. Again, this extended your agreement out until June 30, 2017, subject, however, to the original terms and conditions concerning earlier termination, correct?
Yes.
And then, again, that you could trigger a review in 2014, is that correct?
Yes.
And then if we go to item 2, your, what we've referred to as base salary had now been increased from $200,000 to $220,000 per year. Is that true?
Yes.
If this was the agreement that was in effect at the time of your termination in April of 2013?
It was.
And then, if we might, if we could go to we could go to exhibit number 103.
May I switch books?
You
Because
may.
this one only goes to 90.
Your Honor, we have no objection to exhibit 103.
All right.
All right.
Why don't you just publish it?
She has a hard, coach has a hard time seeing her, so
I'm sorry, I can't get
I want to make sure.
make it go to 200. I'm sorry, what? No. Oh, I have. Oh, you, I might not have it. 170.
I'm looking at 103, so why don't you,
Okay.
actually it is in there.
Yeah, this is the other. I put your book back there.
Oh, no, that's 1,003. So why don't you give me this one, and I'll take this out of your way.
This is the contract that was entered into between you and the University of Southern California, April 9th of 2014.
This is Exhibit 103.
It is, Your Honor.
Which is in.
Yes, Your Honor.
Is that correct?
I just wanted to peek at it if I could.
Sure, go ahead.
Mr. Noonan, in the interest of time, since the document is in evidence, rather than read it,
Okay.
just ask a question and we'll see how it goes.
All right, I will do so.
Okay.
Is it correct that your base salary in the USC contract was $150,000 a year?
Yes.
And am I also correct that the contract provided for standard university fringe benefits? Is that correct?
I'm not sure. The car, I get a car. I could either get a car or get a car allowance.
Just take a quick look at 3.03,
3.03.
which is on page 3.
Page 3. Fringe benefits. Allowing me time off. Is that what we're looking at?
Does it have a provision, and again, this will be in evidence as the jury needs to read it, 3.03A says you're entitled to standard university fringe benefits. Is that correct?
As I'm reading it, it says it's common practice to allow assistant coaches reasonable time off during the non-playing and non-recruiting seasons, and that I shall be provided with reasonable time off in accordance with this industry practice. So I shall not receive paid vacation time off under the standard fringe benefits package.
But you are entitled to all other standard university fringe benefits. Is that correct?
To my benefits, yes.
And then item B, you were also provided with an automobile allowance. Is that correct?
Yes.
And this contract also had provisions for termination for with cause and without cause. Is that correct?
Termination. Yes.
And including, if we go to page 4 of Exhibit 103, the bottom G, again, this has a similar provision that says conduct of the employee is seriously prejudicial to the best interests of the university or its athletic program, or which violates the university's mission, including, and then it gives some additional examples. Is that correct?
Yes.
And under this agreement, while it recites that you are an assistant coach, am I correct that from when you started work at USC, you held the title of associate head coach?
Title, yes.
And University of Southern California is a private institution?
It is.
Correct? And you remain the associate head coach of the women's basketball program at USC as we sit here today, is that correct?
I do think.
And am I also correct that this was a 1-year contract, Exhibit 103?
It was.
And after the first year was open, so you first coached at USC for the 2014-2015 season?
Yes.
And after this contract expired, an additional contract was entered into between you and USC?
Yes.
And we'll get those out later, but to save some time, I correct that your base salary was increased to $160,000 for the 2015-2016 season and $165,000 for the period 2016 to 2017.
You're correct.
And you retained the benefits that you,
Yes,
and they have a retirement plan there, is that correct?
they do.
I'll show you a document that we marked as Exhibit 1007001.
What number is that, please, Mr. Noonan?
It's 1007.
Oh, my goodness. I'll get it. I got it.
Yes.
I have it.
We'll withdraw our objection.
All right, thank you. Why don't we put up Exhibit 1007? And this is a tester. A lot of small print. All right, this is an email from you to your agent, Mr. Meadows, in April of 2014. It looks like several days prior to the execution of Exhibit 103. True?
Is 103 the contract?
Yes.
Yes, that was April 14th.
Now, as I understand it, on this contract, while you're communicating with Mr. Meadows, did he or did he not represent you on this contract?
He did not.
Did anyone else represent you on this agreement?
No. If you're represented, you have to pay your representative.
All right. So you didn't have to pay a representative?
That was the plan.
Okay. And this one says, John, I have signed and sent in the contract. I just want to talk about the second sentence. It says, or the fourth sentence, my base. It says my base is $150,000 with an additional $6,000 for car allowance, coupled with my current pension, which Ed is working on improving, among other things. I'm right around $220,000. I don't think I could have hoped for any better outcome, and I'm really excited to get back on a basketball court. I'm able to maintain my corporate speaking engagements, which I've been doing through the SD Girl Scouts, so before it's all said and done, I hope to be earning more than I was at SDSU. Let me stop you there. Have there been any discussions about a renewal or extension of your 2017?
I'm sorry?
Has there been any discussions yet with USC about a renewal or extension of the second contract you entered into with USC?
No.
Are you pleased with your employment and your position at USC?
I'm thankful.
Now, so is it correct, the only season that you missed coaching then was the 2013 and 14 season?
Your term only, but yes.
My term only, but yes. Was there a person designated as associate head coach prior to your arrival in 2014 at USC?
There was.
So you replaced that person?
I did.
And what is the difference between an assistant coach and the associate head coach, as those terms are used at USC?
At USC, my head coach has never been an assistant coach. She was a professional basketball player. Her career was spent as a professional basketball player. So her the coaching side of the administrative side of things was not something that she had as much experience in. I've been known to be pretty detailed and direct and a good organizer, so my first responsibility was to oversee all the people in our department, in our women's basketball department, and create an infrastructure for everything that we do.
Now, in the season that you missed, am I correct, you applied for a position as an assistant coach with Gonzaga University?
Yes,
And you didn't receive that position, is that correct?
eventually, yes.
And did you formally apply, that is, did you fill out applications for any other positions in the 2014 season, other than anything you might have filled out with Gonzaga?
I filled out with Gonzaga. I filled out with several WNBA teams because of the time of the year. There were no other positions open. I did not apply. There were no other positions open that I was aware of at that point.
And so the only college position that you recall applying for, in which you formally applied in the 2013-2014 season, was at the Gonzaga University, is that correct?
In the whole season, no. I applied for the University of Oregon. I applied for a position at the University of Oregon that year as well.
For that season or for the following season?
When I was unemployed in the 13-14 season.
Yes.
And just if I may, Gonzaga was in June, and then the head coach offered me the position. And then he was coaching in USA, but he went overseas. So I thought I had a position until he got back in late August and told me he wasn't going to be allowed to hire me. So I, at that point, had decided, okay, I'm going to go to Gonzaga. So that summer window was that one job.
But that was for the 2013-14 season. If that job had come to pass, you would have been coaching in that season. Is that correct?
Yes.
And my question is, did you fill out any applications
Yes,
for the
university.
13-14 season other than Gonzaga?
Well, it was September. There were no other positions.
So you did not do that?
Texas San Antonio had a tragedy, and their head coach was killed. And I called the athletics director and emailed, but I don't know that I can't remember. You know, doing everything is online now, so I may have one for Texas San Antonio only because of the uniqueness of the circumstance.
Now, you told us on your direct examination that one of the things that concerns you now or causes you some distress is that you're on this contract basis with USC, and the contract may run out, it may not be renewed. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That was also the case, was it not, at San Diego State? That is, your contracts were for a definite or specified term, true?
The contract was for, I'm sorry?
A definite or specified term, correct?
5 years, yes.
And you talked to us about some of the other issues that are associated with your termination. And the question I had with respect to any of the issues that you talked about, have you sought the care or treatment of any psychologist or physician of that nature to deal with any of these issues that you told the jury about last week?
I gave myself a self-imposed deadline of 1 calendar year from April 16th, 2013. I felt it was only fair to myself, because it was so late in the season, to give yourself a calendar year to try to get a job in basketball and to hustle as hard as you can. And after that 1 calendar year had expired, then I'd have to wake up and deal with the rest of my life, even though I've been a coach my whole life. And I was hired 2 days before my self-imposed deadline.
So the question was, I just asked you, again, I think we covered this in your deposition, Mr. Chapin covered it with you. You have not sought care or treatment from any physician or psychologist with respect to any of the issues that you relate to your termination. Is that correct?
Yes, I tried not to spend a dime.
And you haven't?
Sorry?
And you haven't?
Well, I spent a little, but in that year, not a lot.
Well, are there any prescription medications or anything of that nature that you obtained to deal with the issues that you described from Mr. Chapin?
No.
Thank you. And you also talked a little bit about issues that where you're out and about in the community and some people have said some unkind things to you. That's in San Diego? Is that correct?
Yes.
And you still maintain a residence or place here on Mission Bay? Is that correct?
Yes, but I wouldn't say unkind. That I would disagree with that.
Whether they were kind or unkind.
Yeah.
The record. So, and those are things that you heard following your termination when you were out and about in the community?
Yes.
In the San Diego?
Yes.
And you still maintain a residence on Mission Bay here in San Diego?
I do.
And you also have a place in Los Angeles?
Tiny. Yes.
Right. So you're in Los Angeles, you're there from when? Approximately October through the end of the season?
I just go back and forth, traffic allowing, as best I can. So I don't have any designated period here or there. I don't, my contract expires at the end of this year, so I'm going to hold on to my house in San Diego.
Okay. Let me switch gears on you.
Mr. Noonan, how much more do you have?
I have a ways to go, Your Honor.
Would this be a good time to break?
It would be, because we're going to switch topics.
All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's almost 10:30. Let's take our morning break. If we don't discuss the case, be back at 10:45.